Hey there, booze buddies! Welcome to Paranormal Spirits, where we share a drink, we tell you a spooky story, and then we rip it apart because booze always shows the truth. And as always, we will be playing Emily's drinking game.
Emily's drinking game! Ooh, yeah.
Where every time we screw up a word or phrase, which is quite often, we take a drink. So grab yourself a drink and play along with us. Today is the story of Robert the Doll. There's a lot of conflicting information about Robert out there. In my 25 minutes of research, I did look a little more into this. I gave it a good 2 hours. Robert the Doll is housed at the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. There are rules, and there are people who have had issues after going to see Robert, and they've written letters asking for Robert to forgive them because of the things that have happened after seeing Robert. But where did Robert come from? So Robert was actually created by the Steiff Company in Germany. They're the people who created the first teddy bear. There were other dolls that looked similar to Robert, and originally he looked more like a clown or a jester. He's a little over 3 feet tall, which is very unusual. So they think that Robert was created for like a store display for these dolls. There was a little boy named Robert Eugene Otto, and he received it for his 4th or 5th birthday. This was about 1905. Now, he wasn't called Robert the Doll at that point in time. He was a nameless doll. Little Robert is given this doll for his birthday, and he is just like immediately enamored with this doll, but almost like strangely so. And at one point, he said, "I gifted the doll my name. Now you need to call me Gene." His middle name was Eugene. He's Robert, and for the rest of his life, he went by the name Gene. Not only that, Robert wears a sailor's suit, and it's believed that those were actually Gene's clothes. So he kind of made this effigy inadvertently. He would spend hours with this doll. I mean, it's 1905, so the kid's not like playing on his Nintendo Switch anyway. So Gene took Robert everywhere with him. He was often heard talking to Robert, and his family reported that they would hear him in his room talking to Robert, and they would hear another voice. And so they'd go in and be like, "Gene, who are you talking to?" And he was just like, "It's just me and Robert." So really strange things just started happening, and he was just constantly whispering to Robert. It was really a weird relationship.
Was he small still when this was happening?
Yes. Now, some people report that Eugene even went so far as to create furniture for Robert. He made a separate room for Robert.
He got his own room?
It was a big house. But as the years went on, this would escalate, and these kind of loud, violent commotions would be heard coming from Eugene's room. Furniture would be overturned, there'd be yelling, and all of this was going on between, supposedly, Eugene and Robert.
All I can picture is just Eugene and Robert just tearing it up like Motley Crue after a concert in a hotel room, just like chucking TVs around and just like smashing hotel furniture. That's all that happened in my brain is the two of them just in like hardcore like Motley Crue outfits as well.
It kind of sounds like it from the descriptions, to be honest. And so then like things would be broken, and like furniture and dishes and things would just break around the house, and all this stuff was happening. And Eugene would constantly say Robert did it. And then stories about the doll moving started happening within the family. And so after this started happening, Robert was like banished to the attic, right? They were just like, okay, we got the Motley Crue destruction happening, but the moment movement starts going on, Robert's in the attic. And Eugene was getting scared of Robert at this point. Like, there would be times where they would come in Eugene's room and he would just be terrified of what was happening. So even though he was still attached to Robert, and strangely so almost, he was also scared of him at the same time. And then they would hear footsteps in the attic. They would find Robert in different areas of the house. They would also, and this one is, they would hear like a giggle.
No. Just giggling? This stupid little doll boy is just giggling in the attic, moving around. Kid giggles are just the creepiest.
They are. I mean, kid ghosts in general are creepy.
Which is funny because kid death is almost always like just so tragic. Almost always. It's always tragic and sad. But they're little tiny creepy little ghosts are the worst. So small.
Yeah.
Yuck.
It's the giggle. It is the giggle. It's like,
Yeah. Ugh. No, thank you, sir.
Now, despite the fact that, like I said, Eugene was scared of Robert, he did keep him his entire life. He became an artist. That was what he always wanted to do. He ended up marrying this woman named Anne, who was a musician. So then Eugene got word that his mom was sick and she was dying. And so they went down to Key West, and she did pass away, and they inherited the house. They decided they were going to move in and they were going to live there. Anne was the one that kind of found Robert in a trunk and, was like, do you know what this is? And he was just like, that's my old friend. I don't know if he said it like that.
He literally like turned around in his office chair really slowly and was like, that's my old friend, Robert. Wanna give him a hug?
He was a little bit of an eccentric kind of guy, right? But this was just like a whole new level of weird. And this actually did cause some issues in their marriage. And at one point, their marriage became so strained, Anne moved out into a different bedroom. Now, they stayed married for the rest of his life.
Robert can no longer sleep in this bed with us. It's either him or me. Oh, you choose him?
Now, this house has, like one of those turrets in it. And actually, he used one of the rooms, I think the one maybe at the top of the turret, for his painting room, because it got really good sunlight. It had a lot of windows. And Anne was just kind of like, Eugene, this doll. Like, I can't with this doll anymore. And so Robert was kind of like relegated to the painting room in the turret. And even as an adult, there were people in Key West who report that he would take him everywhere with him and talk to him like he was a real person. Some people will say that Robert was the one that requested to be brought up into the turret room, because one thing that Eugene said was that Robert really liked the view from the turret room. And so kids in the morning when they were going to school, they would see him in the window, and they would report that they would see Robert move from sometimes from one side of the window to the other. They knew it wasn't Eugene because they could see him in another window painting. And people over the years had reported seeing Robert move, but also seeing his face change. Usually if anybody said anything bad about Gene, Robert's face would change and he would not be pleased.
Like his eyebrows would just go, me. I'm mad now.
Eventually, Gene gets sick, and he kind of spends the last 10 years of his life locked up in the turret room with Robert. He kind of shut himself off and was up there with Robert most of the time for 10 years, just hanging out with Robert.
That's a sitcom now. Me and my terminal illness and my doll. Terminal illness and my doll. Yeah, I can picture the whole thing.
So Gene passes away, and now Anne is stuck with the house and Robert. And she's just like, you know what? House way too big for me. Robert, I'm all set with you. And she sold the house, but there was a stipulation. You can buy the house, but Robert has to stay here. Robert is part of the house. Robert comes with the house. There was a couple that bought it, and then I think after a couple of years, they ended up selling it to this family, and the family had a little girl, and the little girl now kind of forms this attachment with Robert, similar to Gene when he was a little boy. But same kind of things are happening, she's attached to him, but she's also kind of freaked out by him. She's not as attached as Gene, but she's freaked out. People are, again, seeing Robert move and hearing the giggling voice and hearing her talk to Robert like Robert was a person.
So for clarification though, when we say move, do we mean physically see him move, or he moves locations?
Both. So at some point, this little girl, she gets attacked by Robert at night. And the parents come in, right? And the dad is like, enough, I've had enough of this. And he tries to get rid of Robert. And then not long after he tries to get rid of Robert, he's found dead in his car of carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's unclear if he did it himself or if it was a malfunction of the car. We don't know for sure. but it was only a couple days after he tried to get rid of Robert.
It was Robert just sitting in the car, like smoking a cigarette, like, hey, oh, yo, guy.
Oh, Robert. Yes. So time goes on, and this woman, now she's a widow. The daughter, I think, moves out of the house, and she has Robert. And she is selling the house. But instead of leaving Robert with the house, she takes Robert with her.
No.
She's the new caretaker of Robert. And she also, in her new place, reports that Robert would move. And then at one point, after several years, I mean, she had him for like 20 years. She had him for a long time. She claimed some sort of attack happened that she felt Robert did to her. So on August 19th, 1994, the widow, her name is Myrtle. Myrtle brings Robert to the museum where he now is. And she's just like, this is Robert. He was Eugene Otto's doll. He's haunted, and I need you to take him. Now, what's really interesting is Eugene Otto also helped found the museum, and they also housed a lot of his artwork. So this ended up actually being like kind of the perfect place to store Robert. So they were like, yeah, okay. You know, like a handful of people knew about Robert. You know, like some of the locals knew about Robert, but not a lot of people knew about Robert at this point in time. He kind of gets put into storage. He's not put on display initially. And because they're just like, well, you know, we don't really know like what's going on with this doll. And so the museum staff find like there's weird stuff happening. Things are getting moved. They're hearing footsteps. They're hearing kids giggling. All of the same kind of things. They'd see Robert move from time to time. The word is getting out about Robert. And within a couple of years, he goes from, you know, a handful of people knowing about him to like thousands of people knowing about him. And they put him on display, and he is in a glass or plexiglass enclosure. So now Robert is on display, and you can go and visit Robert. But when you do go and visit Robert, there are 4 rules you have to abide by. So the first rule is you have to introduce yourself. You have to say, hello. Hi, Robert. My name is Lynn. The second rule is always be polite. So he wants you to be kind to him. You can't just be like a jerk. He's sensitive.
Ugh. Be nice to me.
Now, if you want to take a picture of him, you always have to ask his permission before you take the picture. This is a big one. And one reason they kind of came up with this rule is that when they first put him on display, they found people's cameras when they went to take pictures of him. They were malfunctioning, the batteries were draining, like all kinds of camera issues would happen. And so somehow they kind of like figured out, like, if you ask his permission first, this doesn't tend to happen. And then the fourth rule is you always have to say goodbye to Robert. It's kind of like a Ouija board if you think about it, right? Like you say hello, you say goodbye. And there have been thousands of people who have gone in there and maybe not followed one of the rules. And they've had all kinds of stuff happen to them after they've left seeing Robert. So there's a new documentary. It came out like last October. They had this one woman. She's a photographer. She would take like pictures of auras, you know? And so she wanted to come in and see if she could like photograph Robert's aura. So she asked the museum and got permission. And I guess there was some guy with her. She doesn't say if he was like her assistant or he just happened to be there or whatever. And she's taken the picture of Robert and she's like, oh, Robert's looking handsome today, isn't he? And the guy is just kind of like makes a real snarky comment. And she's just like, oh. And all kinds of stuff happens to her after this. But one thing she did say that was really interesting is that an inanimate object, in theory, shouldn't have an aura. But you can see Robert has an aura, which is really interesting. This woman, her name is Bonnie Randolph. And so she was feeling guilty that this guy had said some stuff about Robert that wasn't too flattering and was just being mean and making fun of Robert. So she says after this happened, her life just took a downward spiral. And she had 8 years of issues between car accidents, financial issues, a broken back, a broken shoulder. She lost her business and the sinking of her houseboat. All of this happened after seeing Robert. So she's had a lot of stuff happen. So she's one of the many people that has written to Robert asking for forgiveness. But there are thousands. And the museum gets, they said, 1 to 3 letters every single day for Robert. Now, not all of them are ones asking for forgiveness. Some ask for Robert's advice. I'm not sure what they're asking for his advice on. Some people ask Robert or curse someone else.
It's not Dear Abby, it's Robert. Dear Robert, does this boy like me? How do I get him to ask me to the dance?
One of the things that I found really interesting with this new documentary that I was talking about was that, so Cindy Kaza, the psychic medium, they had her go there to try to figure out what's going on with Robert, how Robert sort of became the way that he did. One of them is that one of the servants helped take care of Eugene when he was a kid. They say that there might have been an affair with her and Eugene's dad, and she had lost a child, which I believe is true. She did lose a child, but they say this might be the child with her and Thomas, Eugene's dad. And so in her grief, she put the curse on Robert. So they had Cindy go in and she spoke with Robert. And basically what she said was that, like, there is a girl that was kind of the first spirit. So there's a girl that's like attached to Robert. He's not possessed by the spirit. But then she's like, but it's really interesting. She goes, I don't know how else to describe it other than it feels like there has been some sort of spell put on Robert. And basically it attracts spirits to him. So spirits with unfinished business. So there were some children. She goes, but he's kind of like a portal. And these spirits are just attaching themselves to Robert. So he has several spirits around him, according to Cindy. And there's one guy that's kind of nasty. And he's the guy that's doing all of the stuff, like the attacks and the really kind of like not so nice stuff. She said, why are, people having issues? Like if they're not following the rules. In her head, she just heard, because they deserve it. So, these spirits may not be in the right frame of mind. They have unfinished business. Some of them are aggravated, but she's like, basically he's kind of almost like a collection of spirits is what it sounds like, which is really strange, but he himself is a portal. So she also said, I'm getting the sense that people have seen him move. Now, Robert himself isn't actually moving, but what's happening is the spirits around him are manipulating Robert and moving him. That's what people are seeing. So it's not that Robert himself is moving, it's the spirits attached to them are moving him to make it look like Robert is moving.
How did he get like that? Like, did he just like come out of the factory like that? Or like...
No, that's where she thinks there's powerful like spell work here. She's like, this is not anything that's going to be undone. If you believe in that, someone did some spell work on him and created him to be this kind of, I don't want to say vessel, because they're not possessing him. They're just attaching to him. They're attracted to him. These spirits with unfinished business. Maybe he's just some like beacon. Maybe they don't see it as like him as a doll, because now think of him as a congregating spot for like spirits with unfinished business.
I'm really annoyed that his rules are just like, he has unwielding amounts of power, right? Which it appears that he has like a whole lot of power, and his rules are like, be nice to me.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, I don't like that.
There was one woman who claimed her husband's toe got cut off after an issue.
How did it get cut off?
I have no idea.
She cut it off. She literally was like, ha 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 ha, it's Robert.
Robert did it.
Okay, so at what point are you just blaming your crappy life on a doll in Key West? What point are you like, man, oh no, a flat tire because I haven't done any car maintenance on my car? So the 1994 Honda Civic.
Oh, Robert.
Oh, Robert. I want to go visit him, but I don't think I could be trusted.
Yeah, I'm not going with you.
I wouldn't.
No, that even happened to that lady who's a photographer, and the guy was there like saying stuff, and she wasn't.
I think I would apologize, at least. I would be polite to a point. I'm not going to walk in there and be like, yo, bitch, you look bunk. What happened to this? You 100-year-old beast? Like, I'm not going to do that. I would have more fierce rules. Rule number 1, bow.
Yeah. Never turn your back on me.
Don't make direct eye Don't make direct eye contact, but don't be rude and not look me in the face when we're talking. Rule number 3, Bring me snacks.
So apparently, I don't know how, it said they discovered that Robert has a sweet tooth. So now one of the things people send him is candy.
Yeah, the male person in that freaking museum has diabetes now because they're like,
Yeah. Well, they said they don't, out of respect for Robert, they actually don't eat the candy that people send him.
What do you do with it?
Well, I mean, maybe you offer it to the animals outside. I don't know. Give it back to the land.
To the animals of Key West. It's just like one old man who's lived there since 1953 who's like, I love candy. And he just waits outside for the Robert candy every day. What animals? A gator? One gator? Ah, candy. If you'd like to donate to our fund, and we won't curse you, we like martinis, margaritas, pizza, and cake. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's the crappy story of Robert the doll and his stupid ass rules. If you like what you saw, follow my rules. And number 1, like. Number 2, subscribe. And number 3, ring that bell. If you don't like what you saw, I'm gonna haunt you until you write me a letter and apologize. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time for more Drunken Adventures with 2 old, definitely gonna possess a doll when we get dead whores. What? Get out.
Goodbye.
Imagine anytime you were watching a show and something funny happened, instead of ha ha ha, it was ah. Ah. Welcome to Paranormal Spirits. We let you hear us pee.